Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to another installment of the Healing Brothers podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Brandon Jones, and I'm with the legendary, the man himself, Sam Simmons. I was gonna call you Uncle Big, but I just I decided.
Hey. For some reason, that's been coming up a lot more lately. Even the young folks who didn't even know you know, uh, uh, the history of Uncle Big has been calling me Uncle Big. Like everybody wants an uncle all of a sudden. It's like it's been wild. So we've been off for a few weeks.
Yeah.
You off having babies.
That's the last one.
Yeah,
Do this again.
and
I
then
said that before, but this
yeah, I
time
know.
real.
And I was there when you said it. Okay, so and then I'm off acting like a good husband, renewing vows out in Las Vegas.
That was nice. I seen it. I watched. It was really nice.
Hey. It was interesting.
Yeah, they had a nice little setup there. It looked real nice. I didn't realize that it was the daytime till them doors opened at the end. I was like, wow, it was a blind light.
Looked like we was going into heaven, didn't it?
I was like, damn, that was a major difference when y'all walked out. Said, woo, them lights is bright, man. It was a nice day in Vegas.
Yeah. Well, actually, it was the same temperature in Vegas as it was here, like in its 60s and early in the morning 55. It was a little chilly, that sun was bright, as you can tell, but we had renewed our vows in that same church 20 years ago.
Okay.
With my brothers and all of them. We all went on my 10th, yeah. But the church is owned by a younger couple, and they've done a lot of work. It's a lot brighter in there. It was a lot brighter in there this time than, and then we got video from that too. So I'm gonna put them all together. The original video that's sketchy that was done with an old camera, where the original wedding, but yeah, I mean, it went surprisingly well. The limousine picked us up late. My anal friends were mad because they were trying to see it live, but it didn't start until 20 after, instead of 4 o'clock. I got on there and it wasn't nobody there, and it switched me off. It's like, oh God, of all people, I knew it was you. Oh Curtis. But yeah, it worked out well. Ironically, it almost was a lot. Was actually, as my wife put it, this went better than all the other ones. And she got her the dress she wanted, and which fit her well and all like that, and a lot more confidence. So I guess over the years, so she's happy. So I guess that's what's important.
Hey, there you go. Well, good. I'm glad that all worked out, and you got some time away from the craziness here in the Twin Cities. It does not stop. The nonstop nonsense. And I think that leads into our conversation for today. Our topic for today is Black masculinity. It seems to be the topic of conversation is what Black men ain't doing right with their masculinity.
Oh,
seriously, if you think about it, we think about this year. Think about a lot of the viral moments in the Black community. They've involved Black men doing something wrong for the most part. We've had Joe Budden having accusations. We've had R. Kelly. We had Kwame Brown going viral. We've had who else? Kevin Samuels. We've had, there's a lot of, we've had outside of Sha'Carri Richardson. I think she might have been one of her, and then Simone Biles they probably took the summer with a lot of the national attention just due to mental health concerns in the Olympics. But outside of that, Black men have been pretty much just dysfunctional and in the spotlight for it, unfortunately. But that's not the whole part of our conversation. We really wanted to just kind of take a deep dive and talk about what masculinity is. What is black masculinity? Is there a difference between black masculinity and non-black masculinity? And then what my big question for you, and maybe this is where we can start, is what are when did you start to see a shift, if you've seen a shift in black masculinity? As a younger person, when I look back at old videos or I read books from the 50s and 60s, or I read articles from that time period, it seems to be a different type of masculinity that was presented at that time than it is today. And I'm wondering, was there a shift, if anything? And then where do you see black masculinity today? And now I'll just open it up with there. We'll see how the conversation goes.
Uh, yeah, I think the shift has always been consistent, right? There's been a consistent shift in black masculinity. We cannot ignore the stifling of masculinity amongst black men from the beginning, especially when we talk about America, right?
Mm-hmm.
And trying to find our legs as black men in this in America has always been a challenge, right? The ideal of masculinity in America, especially if we're talking about um, us who are, you know, uh, have backgrounds in with American slavery or slavery or that kind of thing. Um, our manhood has always been challenged, right? And then you're in a society uh, 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 that when they say you're free, your example of masculinity in America is all based on white patriarchy, right? Which goes out of its way to uh, minimize men, women, and men and women who are not white, right? I mean, and even white women in the beginning, women and children. And so we have always, either try to find our masculinity from the ideal of strength, the ideal of being able to protect our women and our families, which has always been taken away from us early in the process. Um, and so, when we, in early in the after slavery, what a lot of us got married because we weren't allowed to get married and try to build families, and I think there's always been a struggle trying to find your way as identity as a man, just in general, but as a black man in particular, right? And so you can see the different transitions. I mean, um, this whole the biggest piece is, and they talked about it in the old material, especially in the 70s, the pose generation, posing and looking cool and looking strong and and being able to look the part, it's a and that always didn't always seep into uh living the part, because I don't think we was able to identify that, right? Always being strong, not being able to take a lot of pain. But that's our people in general, and then you add manhood on top of that, it takes it to a whole nother level, right? And then that whole thing about um um you know being feeling, if the women in your life respect you or don't respect you, uh um has been a big piece. So over the transition, one of the things is where our manhood got into, how do we dominate the women in our lives, on the back of our women. At least from my standpoint, I get in trouble when I say this stuff, but if you look at some of our masculinity, it's really based on the back of women, you know, uh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and dominating them, and either physically, sexually, or emotionally, or all, at the same time, being emotionally impotent on our own part, right? And that ain't always been true, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you, and then over time, if you are a man who worked hard, took care of his family, somewhere along the line in the transition, you were considered a sucker. It's like, you get kind of played by your boys when you hang out with them and stuff, right? That woman go take it. So there's this kind of tension that's been building and consistently there because of our situation within the ideal of slavery, where it appeared that black women were elevated above black men, and part of that had to do with black women were more valuable because they could have more slaves and that kind of stuff, right? And bear children, but at the same time, um, um, was easier for that white male to deal with her than to deal with that black male, because he didn't want him to feel like he had any power because of the fear. So I don't know if I'm all over the place, but there's always been a transition and a seeking of what does black maleness mean, right? And everybody's viewpoint on what that is, right? Um, and again, we got to understand what lenses we look at black maleness through, right? And so if we only look through from the ideal of protector, provider, and all these other kind of pieces that's there, right? And he's not in a position to do those things, and you're judging him on something that he's not in a position to do, and he doesn't have the skills to fill it in with other things like like passion, like compassion, understanding, communication skills, and those other kind of stuff. And a lot of black women's needs from black men is not as much as is not as much around the issue of safety, but the need for stability, right? And a need for stability, a need to be able to count on you, the need to partner with you to for the betterment of the group or of the family, right? And so we went through this phase where uh, some scholars talk about the women's rights movement that was led, that black women were involved with, along with white women, where women don't believe they need a man, right? And women independence became frightening, but that came frightening to all men, but even more frightening, I think, to black men, right? And so making that emotional transition has not been there. And so and not having examples, losing the examples around couples, losing the example around marriage, losing the example about families that started decreasing even more so, late 60s, early 70s, and then you get in the 80s, and then you have this generation now that have no clue on what that looks like because of because I cannot overemphasize the effect that the crack era had on the black community, what was left of the black community in its ideals of community. And I do it like this because our ideals of community have kind of been up and down as well, right? Everybody's in. We have glamorized the ideal community that might not always existed for a lot of us, right? And now so the glamorization now is all based on what what I can get out of you and what you can get out of me. Even an increased effort on materialism, what I got materially, how well I can screw, and all these other pieces, and not really knowing what it means to be in relationship. Okay, and I know that we're not really talking about that, But all of these things, I think, affect our view of masculinity in terms of what we do, the strength, uh, uh, in parts of our community, homophobia. All of it is sounds like built in a whole toxic mix of fear of
Mm.
being irrelevant, right? And I think that has seeped into black masculinity. And and again, there's people who over the years have talked about these things, about how do we guide that, how do we build our own masculinity that's not just about posing, not just about how I look, not just about how I manage my life around dealing with women, and the whole thing about not being afraid to die, right? It's like not being afraid to die, and some of the masculinity uh, um, um, is based on how not so much how I live, but how I prepare to die, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a and again, this is not true for all of our community, but it's so significant it becomes a problem.
Yeah, and and I would add, I don't think that all males participate in that level of engagement or understanding, but we're all impacted by it because we're judged on it. Two, we're only like one, maybe 2 degrees separated. Most people, that's their brother, that's their father, that's their uncle, that's their son, that's their nephew. It's You're not disconnected from the things that are going on. You could try to shield yourself from it, but it's literally, a phone call, text message, a car ride away from you. And um, so I think it impacts us all at the end of the day, even if we're not functioning in that space. I want to go back to something you said, because I slightly disagree. I don't disagree, but I think there's more to it. I think there's something missing. We talked about the fear. There's a fear with the masculinity. What do you think that fear is about? Is it a fear of just being in this society? Is it a fear of taking accountability in the community? Like, what do you think the fear is about? Because you talked about a fear of being irrelevant. That's what you said.
Yeah. Well, um, not being important,
Okay.
right? You know how sometimes the big deal is black women act like they don't need me, right?
Okay.
And so what does that mean? How is she supposed to need you? What does
Hmm.
that look like? And sometimes when you ask men what does that mean, what they define sounds real selfish. You
Okay.
know, uh, um, you know, she listens to me, she takes my advice, she lets me make decisions and all these other kind of stuff, right? And 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 uh um um so my whole thing is if I need you to need me, uh what does that look like, right?
Mm.
And if you can't identify what that look like, how am I supposed to need you,
Hmm.
right? And then my whole thing is I don't want you to be with me because you need me. I would rather you to be with me because you want to be with me,
Hmm.
right? And so um yeah, you want to be with me. So what part of that you had a problem with? So we
Yeah.
might.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily a disagreement. And you're really highlighting some of the codependency that's tied into the masculine identity of the black man. But the part about the importance of relevance, I agree with it to a certain extent. I think there's really a misguided or kind of an altered view of what relevance is for a black man. Like you, black men feel like they're relevant by having those things because our idea of what a man's supposed to be is in response to not having something or being
Right,
traumatized or to dominate women. Like
right,
it's so already you in this society you have misconstrued how to be a man, and
right,
you've taken a low bar to what manhood is by trying to dominate your woman, or trying to hold a status in the community that doesn't help to make the community function at all.
Right.
And then and then it shows up in what is called toxic masculinity
Right.
outside of the community. And it
Right.
shows up in these abusive cycles and in these codependent cycles. And we literally have two generations, and we're going on our third, who have formulated families around this. And I use the word families loosely because they're really just like survival units. It's just individuals, right? That's
Right.
my dad. It's not like this is my family. It's like that's my dad, that's my mom, that's my brother, that's my sister. As in, we are these individuals who just kind of figure out how to survive. Like they're survival units. And again, and I think when I look at other ethnicities and I have these conversations with folks who are from various different, racial categories or ethnicities, their disposition on masculinity and family is way different. It's like they don't even get what the hell going on with black folks. That it's like so foreign to them that it's kind of scary. And I mean, you can even look at the animal kingdom. You don't see stuff like that you see in our community. Like the trauma has been so thick and just so rampant that we've gotten to this place where you said something that I think is important. We've really like lost this concept for what a family's supposed to be, and we've romanticized the dysfunction of not having families by saying, well, there's blended families, and just accepting that's what like that's okay without doing anything to correct it and try to have stable individuals within the unit so that children have a chance. But I'll let you go.
Well, the thing about the blended family that we cannot forget is that was a resiliency factor, especially when we're talking about coming out the era of slavery, right?
Sure.
Building family out of no family at all, right?
That was very different than today, though. But go ahead.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that's again, that's why I went back to that, right?
Yeah.
There's always been this seeking of what that looks like for us, right? And the fact that we're a very codependent people, and that came out of the need to survive as a people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that codependency has even overwhelmed our ideals of, especially when we start talking about being in a relationship, right? You got to meet all my emotional needs. You got to be aware of all how you hurt my feelings in all aspects. You know, and if I'm your man, you should agree with me more often than you not, right? And I had a conversation about this with a gentleman not too long ago about being married and what does that look like, and having a significant other make decisions without you, or every time I make a decision, they got something to say about it, and I don't know how I'm gonna deal with that and that kind of stuff. And and the whole time they're complaining about this other individual, right? And what they really was complaining about is the tax they felt was on their masculinity, right? Is what they really was saying in my book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I told them, I said, well, I think you need to put some more time on why you respond the way you do to them. And they didn't know what to do with that, because I put it back on them, right? What is it you want? Are you able to articulate what you want or what you need, right? Because we do a lot of lazy kind of efforts. We want to assume that people know what we want and need without saying what we want and need. Because I don't think we can say what we want and need because we're not really sure. Because we're still struggling with that ideal of who we are as men. How do we fit in the changing times? And men are across the board in America and around the world are going through these changes, where women are tired of being tired and that kind of thing, right? Where women are trying to make a way. And within our community, there's a major relationship in terms of how we view our masculinity and how it ties to the women in our lives, right? And even when we start talking about men being raised in single parent homes, One of the things I was saying to somebody the other day is sometimes men who are raised in a single parent home and a lot of who they are is tied to their mothers got them real confused, right? In terms of their masculinity, right? Because one minute they're controlling their lives, but the next minute they're telling them not to allow no other woman to control their lives. All the same breath.
Mm-hmm.
You know them girls are treacherous, right? And blah 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 blah, right? So so that emotional confusion, and then even if they do have males in their life, and a lot of black men, even if they're not raised with their fathers, got significant males in their lives, they're not even working through it that well. Dude, you got you man, aren't you going to say something to her about that? When you going to put her in her place? Why are you in my business?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I remember there was a colleague of ours who wanted to have this conversation, and he said to me, "I think we should talk about why black women won't let us lead." And that just kind of threw me for a loop. What do you mean
Mm-hmm.
let you lead?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, she needs to take a back seat so I can feel like a whole man. And I, you know what? And I understand that, especially if you look at the history of black leadership. And now that we're getting new information about their personal lives,
Mm-hmm.
black women did that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Black women did that. Let them lead and stand behind and take their shit, right?
Yeah.
And women now ain't willing to do that. And so now what we got is this competition going on between the two, right?
That makes no sense from my standpoint. It doesn't, because even with that statement that this community leader made, what we have so many issues in our community that we don't have enough leaders. So to me, there ain't no competition with leading with black women or them stepping to the side so you can step up. Just do the work and and just move forward. Which brings me to my next point is, what is black leadership? Like when I look at you don't want to, if you don't want to go here, I won't go there. But it's like, what are you doing? Like what are we doing? Well, because I'm, again, when I compare us to other groups, who are their leaders?
Yeah, well,
Like, what are we doing?
I often try to avoid that idea of comparing us to other groups, because I think um, one of the things we need to get a handle on and really embrace, no matter how uncomfortable it is, embrace how different we are in our experience. If we would just embrace that, I think we would get a lot ahead of further, right? I mean, how unique we are in terms of our experience here in America, how unique our experience with trauma in America is, are unique in terms of the battles we had. That doesn't mean other cultural or racial groups' battles are not significant. But if we can't embrace the uniqueness in both the good and bad of our experience, we'll never get a handle on this shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there is no comparison. I mean, when you talk about health, where other communities seem healthier, but if we don't incorporate what kind of roadblocks came about uh for us not to get there, okay, and and from what level did we start, then we can't understand that, right? I think that's the only
Mm-hmm.
time I like to compare that. So I just need to say that. But the thing is when you talk about leadership, is what is your leadership based on?
Right.
Is it based on your personality? Because we got a long history of the leader who speaks well, looks good, smells good, gets all the attention.
Mm-hmm.
A leader who's not trying to be out front, who's just trying to do things, a lot of times in our community has gotten walked on or taken advantage of, right? You know, there's a quote, and I got to paraphrase it, and how it goes: a true leader is one who the people he's leading don't know that they're being led, or something on that order, right? You know, in other words, how
I
you
would
do
agree with
that,
that.
you know, and because of that, in my particular case, I never wanted to be to the point. I never wanted to be a leader, to the point I never wanted to run my own program.
Mm-hmm.
That's how much I didn't want to be a leader. See, that's the bitter taste I had about leadership in our community, because I didn't want to be seen in that light, right? Because you got to look at, is it about them, or is it about the mission, or and do they understand their mission, right? And so, again, leadership in our community has been based on the kind of trauma kind of view, right? Who were the leaders in our community for a long time, and
Clergy.
still to some degree, the pastor, that minister, and a lot of our community leaders come out of that tradition of religion, community activists, and some of those, ironically, a lot of those come out of the prison.
Yeah.
Right.
And
if they ain't come out of prison, the old adage, and I'm getting ready to get in trouble, it is not surprising that many preachers were pimps at one time, because it's about manipulating people. Okay.
But pause. You just stop right there. Ex-prisoners, preachers, and pimps. Those 3 P's, right? If that's the disposition for what our leadership is, that doesn't work in this social context. And you don't like comparing groups, but you have to, because we're all competing here. Like, no other community has ex-prisoners, pimps, and preachers leading their community.
Well,
it's
that's
politicians, lawyers.
That's not
financial.
Totally true.
Okay.
They just don't have them to be as prominent. There's some in the Latina communities and some of the other communities there that's not as
Catholic priests, making things happen. But see, I'm thinking about this from probably with a tinfoil hat on,
right?
But see, those folks, from what I see, now I'm not in them communities as much, but from what I see, those folks are usually a part of a network to help either that community or that level of their society function. So you'll see, like, if you look at like the mob, right, the Italian mafia, they always had a connection to what? Politicians, religious folks, the police department. Like, they had this network of influence, even though they were doing, illegal activities. It was a power structure. It was a social structure. They understood how to pull the levers within a society, and some people will say that was Italian Americans' leadership for years, even though that there was carnage and all types of trauma happening, death and everything.
Well, but the issue is you cannot jump over the issue of race in those kind of things. Trying to have those connections as a Black leader. Right, and it's possible, because there is folks, and I hear what you're saying. The problem comes down to if we cannot ignore that uniqueness of our trauma. That's why I say the overall thing is, if we could just put our arms around our unique experience, so that experience don't harm us. Right,
we got to accept it.
We got to accept it, right? Because again, even when you do have those same entities of power and connections, unfortunately, you find so many ways to sabotage it. Right?
As Black folks,
Right.
yeah, I can say yes.
You know,
We got a lot of examples of this.
and because it comes back to the ideal of leadership sometime in our community.
Yes.
I'll give you an example. Okay, remember I said I try real consciously, and it ain't working now these days for some reason. To not, when people say, well, Mr. Simmons, he's one of our community leaders. Please don't do that to me, please. And I'll say that to folks. Please don't do that to me. Right? But even with that, even in a small example, I'll be given a lecture, right? And I'm not saying everything I say is perfectly right, but right according to what I understand, right? It ain't amazing no more. It's interesting to me if there's a black man in the room, and more so if there's a black man in the room and the majority of the room is white, you'll get this one black man who has to come up and he say, I got a question. And this question is not a question. It's challenging what I just said.
What yeah.
Like, okay, there's another important Negro in the room. It's like, dude, and then make it so bad is what the hell he just said. Either one, didn't make no damn sense because he was making it up, or two, he just said the same thing I said, but in different words, and not as eloquently as I did. But he had to let everybody in the room know there is another important Negro in the room. And I have this happen all the time, right? And we see that with leadership, right? With the jostling for position to be important. Again, what is the leadership? Is the leadership used to fulfill or to deal with your own trauma of irrelevance? That word come back again. Think about it. We're back to that feeling irrelevant. The fear of feeling irrelevant, right? Where we were having that, when you asked me about that, using that term earlier, it still comes back to that. That insecurity of being irrelevant, right? I used to see it in the street. I'm Uncle Big, but if Uncle Bigger comes in the room, I got to take a back seat. Right? And I knew how to do that. That's how I stayed alive out there. Right? And had to stroke Uncle Bigger's ego, to be, that was my way of negotiating my way through there. It's like some people are like, Uncle Bigger, why you like that dude? Hey man, Sam's cool, blah 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 blah. Well, yeah, because I ain't trying to challenge you, right? First of all, you ain't got nothing I want. Secondly, it ain't in my best interest, and it might not be in the best interest of what we got going on at the time, if that's what we're about, right? So it still comes back to feeling irrelevant, feeling if we're going to be forgotten about. I mean, we've seen in our own community. We've had community leaders who have disappeared, and all of a sudden they don't pop back up in the scene, and they ain't no more relevant than they was when they disappeared. But their black asses is showing up on TV and stuff and making stupid ass statements. Enough is enough. And when and the ironic part is they'll say one thing that is relevant, but mess it all up with their bullshit.
We just gotta love each other, Sam. Come on. We just need love.
What does love mean? If you're in my group, it's like, what does love mean?
But I think that's what we gotta. That is the answer that we get every time something happens.
When did we come together? When were we allowed to love each other?
I don't know. Apparently, we've been allowed to love each other, except for the last 25 years. We stopped loving each other. That's when all the trauma
Hell,
started to seep into the streets with the
hell,
violence.
man, please.
That's what, yeah. So when it comes to masculinity and manhood, I think there is a level of leadership that is a part of this that doesn't get talked about because we get caught into our male female dynamic and competing with the women. And I feel like that just that right there highlights how we are so disconnected from what our role is supposed to be as far as men for the community, and we continue to get into this battle about who's supposed to lead when you should just step up and do your part and just lead, because people follow for I mean, let me back up. Black folks, you kind of said this, but you didn't say it. But we are more likely to follow a persona than a philosophy. And if you look at other, and then I know you don't like to compare groups, but I have to. A lot of other groups, they can be influenced by people from time to time, but a lot of times they're following philosophy. They're following a thought process that a person's bringing, not just because they look good and sound good. Uh, they are moving on an action, and I think that's one of the things that we just miss. And then we get these kind of canned answers that we've been getting for 30 years about loving each other, and we got to come together, and enough is enough. Like at some point, we got to make a shift, and
well,
I think men need to be a part of that shift. Go ahead.
Well, the thing is again, feeling irrelevant, being afraid of being wrong, all those kind of things go along with that, right? Because I mean, right now, you're right. We got to do some shit very different right now.
Very different,
right?
It's
I mean, and some of them things might sound in some people's eyes as white stuff, right?
Which is also problematic.
Right.
But I get it.
It's like like I believe there's some people who should be taken off the street, period. Period.
I would agree.
Right.
I think we got enough examples of that.
Right. I mean, but we'll end up trying to focus on stuff we can't do nothing about or whatever, and that all of nothing response. I think where we probably could have started this conversation is where we started 13, 14 years ago with the Black Men Healing Conference.
Mm-hmm.
The Black Men Healing Conference was based off of this. Right. Because even in the, maybe, we should rewrite that article, the original article, because we rewrote it twice, I think, but, update it even again, is when we talk about the issues in our community, what never gets talked about. And that was Black male trauma. Right. And the Black male trauma is still core to why we're having difficulty when we're talking about Black masculinity. Again, trauma feeds the fear of being irrelevant, of not being important, or the fear of being wrong, right? And again, when how you look and how you perceived and all these other kind of things becomes more important than your substance, right? I get credit for things I don't think is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And part of it is I'm consistent. Now, that don't mean I'm always right, but I'm consistent. I try to be fair with everybody, no matter how grouchy it might seem. Right. And I don't need other folks to make me important, because I ain't trying to be important. I'm just trying to be Sam. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that has helped over the years in my relationships. Some of them have gone to the wayside because, I just, if you can't handle the way I am, then fine. I'm not trying to get you to change. Mm-hmm. I've had relationships where it said that people to stop dealing with me because they don't feel comfortable around me because of my consistency about certain things. But I don't tell you have to change. right? Uh, I know what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do for the most part, and that don't matter what kind of relationship it is. You know, I'm learning more and more over the years. The more I try, the less time I spend trying to control people in all my relationships, the better off I am in the long run. In the short run, it might be painful, and so I guess when we're talking about black maleness, it's really about how do I center myself around myself and not on the back of women and children or the community.
But if
How,
a if a
how do I
well,
do that? You know,
yeah, and if a black man does that, is he considered a sellout? Because I think that might be what comes next.
well, the
You know,
thing
sell it
is,
out.
but see, me being centered, you can call me sellout, Uncle Tom, or whatever, but just don't call me late for dinner
Oh, okay. There we go.
because if I don't know who I am and I'm not clear about who I am, calling me Uncle Tom is going to throw me off my square.
Mm.
Call me a sellout is going to throw me off my square. But when I make it real clear to you, I don't give a shit, you know, and I can live with me and be fair for the most part, consistently, not be perfect, but be fair, right? And being willing, as much as difficult as it is, to learn when I'm wrong, right? And being willing to evolve. You can't evolve if you're scared. You know, I've had to evolve on issues around homosexuality, about dating, um, 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 and all these things in terms of the kind of stuff that I contributed to other people's trauma. I had to make peace with even that part of who I was, right? But again, if you so afraid of what other people think, you know, and not that people, you know, oh, everybody worry about what other. I don't worry about what other people think. Does it affect me? Yes. Do I allow it to affect me too much? No. Have it affect me at times? Yeah. And throw me off my square? Yeah. Because I never said I was perfect. But you know, I'm always consistently in every situation try to examine what did I do first. Not what you did to me, but what did I do first? What part did I play? And if I decided I didn't play any part, how do I change my response if it ended up being a wrong? So it's really about me.
Sure.
And we've been taught in our community when it's about you, you're being selfish,
Right.
right? And there's a time where you have to be allowed, because I never understood when people say understand who you are, right? That's always been a concept that's been real difficult. Understand who you are. I don't know if I understand who I am, but I understand who I would like to be. And that could change. Right?
So know thyself is less about who you were or who you are, but who you want to be. It's more projecting in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
And basing it on what's currently going on, though.
Right.
Right. I base it on what's currently going on for the simple fact that, again, I had to evolve over time, right, on a lot of areas. And I've been lucky enough that I wasn't scarred by as many social things as some of my other counterparts is, right? I wasn't scarred heavily by my relationship with white folks. You know, I probably was more scarred by my relationship with black folks, right? Because white folks for me was easy to understand, you know, and but I couldn't understand is why everything I do to help you and you're still harming me.
Mm.
Right? So I had to get to that point.
Yeah.
But the thing is one of the things is again, I hear a lot of videos about black women demasculating black men, and they don't know their place, and they don't think they need us. Man, I did a group with a bunch of young mothers,
mm-hmm.
and the saddest thing I heard, but it was real, we were talking to these young mothers about what kind of services they could use in the program I was working in, right? We wanted to get their input. And we brought up, because we're trying to involve fathers more in these families, right? Because,
Mm-hmm.
these women ain't having the kids by their damn self, right? And we brought up co-parenting. Those women were shook.
Mm.
That scared the shit out of them.
Wow.
One woman says, she had just broke up with her dude, and I know she was trying because I met the dude, right? Mm-hmm. She said, I found that when it's just me and my kids, it's less stressful.
Wow.
She said having him around was more stressful because he was more needy than my damn children.
Damn. Wow.
And then this other girl said, Mr. Simmons, I don't want to do nothing with no co-parenting. What me and the kids are doing just fine. I don't need that extra stress.
Oh boy, that's sad, man.
Think about it. And I mean, man, and they were, and the thing is the things they were saying made damn sense. That's the bad part about it.
Wow. But see, to me, that's full circle what we just were talking about, where back to leadership. Like, you, as a man, you shouldn't be worried about what your counterparts are doing. They're not blocking you from doing anything. You just got to get to work. And I think, again, that altered masculinity thing I was talking about earlier is a lot of black men have shifted to where being, so having agency yourself and being able to do things yourself has been, let me find a woman that can take care of me. And I think that is dangerous when it comes to masc. That is anti-masculinity to me. But that's me. Shouldn't be dependent.
Now say it again.
I say that a lot of men have found it. I'm gonna rephrase what I said. A lot of men have found it as almost like a survival technique to be dependent on women. So when you have these young ladies telling you their experience and hearing co-parenting as this like idea that is completely out of the blue because they have to take care of their partner, this male who's almost like an adult child, I think that that's anti-masculinity. I don't think that that's masculine at all. You're at that point, you're functioning as an adult child that doesn't have a disability or anything of that nature, and you're expecting your woman to take care of you.
And if you would talk to the man, he would say that's not what's happening.
I know, because their concept for masculinity has been altered.
Right.
They're almost, I mean, it's like Arrested Development. Like, you are just an adult child, and that has become acceptable within our community for a good chunk of our men, is to function like grown babies, grown children. That's not cool.
But the thing is you see a different version of that with men who are financially independent, right?
Say more about that.
Well, they don't need a woman financially, but they're still emotionally impotent, right?
But again, I think that they're altered. You should have an emotional connection with people. Like, that's something that you, as a human being, hopefully you do have. But your emotional state shouldn't depend on how somebody else's emotion either. Like, at some point, there's a balance there. But I see what you're saying, where some of these guys don't even know how to function. And this is one of the reasons why I always say that for a lot of black men, anger is not a secondary emotion; it's primary, because they've already They haven't even developed emotional intelligence to connect to other emotions.
Well, one of the other things we didn't get to, and we're not going to because we're almost out of time, is when you add women to this equation, and unfortunately, black masculinity does not exist without women.
Yeah.
Okay, is there fear of women? Overwhelming fear of women.
Of black women. Let's be
specific.
Yeah. And what do you mean fear? Because most black men would say they ain't scared of those sisters. They fear. I ain't scared of nothing.
When you come into a relationship with the whole goal of controlling another person, that means you're scared.
But that's what manhood is, Sam. I'm a man.
The ironic part is a lot of the black women come in with the same deal.
Exactly. Bingo. And that's gonna be my next thing. Is that's what she expects me to do, Sam. I ain't no real man if I can't talk to her like that. So, and there's a lot of young women who they expect that energy and that perspective. Otherwise, you're boring, you're lame, you're not exciting, and then you're out.
Right, be a man, until I be a man until I don't like it is what it boils down to.
Sheesh.
You know what I'm saying? And you talking about confusing. Be a man until I don't like it. Right?
Man, that is so dangerous.
Our stuff is your stuff is our stuff and my stuff is my stuff. All that on both sides. So we got people who are competing emotionally and are say they're in relationships, but they're not trusting. Gets back to what you were saying. They're survival units and not relationships.
Right.
And so
you can't build community on that at all. But go ahead.
So what's the moral to the story? Because I think we were all over the place.
The moral to the story is that black masculinity, if we need to reevaluate what that looks like, because our current concept of masculinity is not beneficial to the community, to families, or to our children. And both for black men and women really need to think about what does this mean, and it ain't all toxic. That's the other thing too. Like, somebody asked a question on this live stream, and it kind of messed me up. And I wanted to ask you this question, but I didn't want to get into it. But I'm going to leave this at the end for people to think about. But when it comes to black men, what is one positive thing that they contribute to the community? And this was a 3-hour live stream, and I listened to the whole thing. And there wasn't one person that hopped on that call that could answer that question. What is one positive thing that black men bring to the community? Just one.
Strength when they're healthy.
Okay.
And I'm talking about, I'm not just talking about physical strength, right? Mm-hmm. And it gets back to what black women really need from their man is stability. If you're a stable individual, if you're the stable one in the individual, that relationship does very well.
Yeah, if you're the stable one in the relationship, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's why it's really about me and not about everybody else. So on that note,
we are out. There's another great show. We'll be back next Sunday with another topic discussing things that go on in the black community. I am one of your co-hosts, Brandon Jones. He's Sam Simmons. Be sure to share the episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're out. Peace.